Dear colleagues, dear distinguished guests, thank you very much for coming today. So actually this is the continuance already for the third day. We have our Days of Indian Science in Serbia. After the initial opening of the exhibition at Faculty of Philology and yesterday's very successful conference which we had with 3 panels and so on, today we have a lecture of Professor Guha in our institute, and today evening at 6 o'clock in Novi Sad there will be the lecture as well. Some of the things we have heard here will be able also for our friends and colleagues in Matica Srpska in Novi Sad to be presented. Actually, so today we have the honor, really, first for those who haven't been yesterday, we have two more very distinguished guests, Professor Rabindranath Tagore and Professor Udayan Banerjee from Varanasi, and our today's lecturer, Professor Chinmoy Guha from Calcutta University. I wouldn't take more time than really to express our huge gratitude for their arrival to Serbia these days, and to again thank to our colleagues who have organized yesterday's conference, Sanja and Professor Petrovic. And I would like to ask our editor of Tribuna, Stevan Gajic, to take the floor and to briefly present Professor Chinmoy Guha, after which we will have the pleasure of listening to his lecture, which was, as you see, named Rolland in India, Sketch of a Great World. Professor Guha, thank you once more for coming, and please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Professor Guha. It was a pleasure to hear your lecture and afterwards comments during the 8-hour session of our conference that we have successfully managed to have. I will just say a couple of biographical details about you. So Professor Guha is a university professor at the University of Calcutta. He's also a former Vice Chancellor of the University of Tagore in Calcutta. And he is a very fruitful writer, translator, and editor. And so far he has written 25 books in Bengali, French, and English language. Please, the floor is yours. The format is that you will speak for around 40 to 45 minutes, up to 50. Yeah, 50. Okay. Yes, I mean, it's stretchable, but that's the rules. And then afterwards, the audience will have the opportunity to ask you questions, and we will have a discussion.
Thank you very much. So it's a great honor once again. I don't know how happy I am and how to express my happiness when I arrived in Serbia. Such a beautiful place, such wonderful people, so different from my experience in West Europe. Because this earnestness, the sincerity, and the high standard I thought will make my intellectual quest. I really thought it was a very enriching experience. I met great people, wonderful people. Name them up there, including, of course, Professor Alexander Petrovic, the director of the Institute of European Studies, all my colleagues, and really it's been a very, very revealing experience. Now, yesterday I had about 25 minutes, so I thought maybe I could elaborate it further because it's important. I am involved with what Theodor Adorno said, the impossible practice of cultural criticism. The impossible practice of cultural criticism. And when cultural industry has commodified all art and literature and suffocated individuality, this cultural industry, how can it come out of the shackles and form a discourse? I think it's a concern of all of us here. Form a discourse of culture, ethics and politics. And after all, the goal is justice. After all, the goal is courage, temperance, honor, mercy, wisdom, friendship, moderation and contemplation. Because we have to find out our own survival strategies and humanize our quest Otherwise it makes no sense at all. We are not building castles in the air, wasting our time, adding to the garbage of mankind. We can't do that. I'm sure, like all of you, me too, in my own very small way, I'm trying to reflect on the human condition in a world where clusters are crumbling and beings are cracking all around us. And let's not forget what the time we went through. You know it better than anybody else. The trauma of the last century. For example, Isaiah Berlin, we know it very well, but just to remind ourselves, called it the most terrible century in Western history. And for René Dumont, the agronomist and ecologist, I see it only as a century of massacres and wars. And for the literature, William Golding, it was the most violent century in human history. And I looked up what Menuhin said, the musician. And for him, the 20th century raised the greatest hopes conceived by humanity and destroyed all illusions and ideals. For the literature Nobel laureate Goldsmith, the most violent century in human history. For Isaiah Berlin, the most terrible century in Western history. For René Dumont, a century of massacres, mutinies, and for Yevgeny Menuhin, the 20th century raised the greatest hopes conceived by humanity and destroyed all illusions and ideals. Yet we have to find out survival strategies. And after having come to this country, I now know how you've been able to, despite the trauma, preserve in you so much light. And it's so rewarding for us in other parts of the world to see that. Much to learn from you, I must say. And I know I'm not flattering or exaggerating what I say. So the fight is on, despite the terrible times. We cannot live in a fool's paradise, but in our own way we tackle the situation. As a literary man, I went back to history and I said something yesterday very important. I think I cited Theodor's book, Memory is a Remedy for Evil. Maybe that can help us to resist. 25 days before his death, Jean-Paul Sartre said in March 1980, je résiste, I resist. Je sais que je mourrai dans l'espoir, mais cet espoir, il faut le fonder. Je sais que je mourrai dans l'espoir, mais cet espoir, il faut le fonder. I resist. Just imagine Jean-Paul Sartre. And I mean, I resist. I know that I'll die in hope, but this hope has to be established. Je sais que je mourrai dans l'espoir, mais cet espoir, il faut le fonder. We have to establish it, but I know that I should die in hope. Now, I go back to this man, Romain Rolland, not because he was a Frenchman, he was not. I think he was more European than French. He left his country after the war, before the war, after the war, and especially in 1922, he left the country for a neutral space and lived in Switzerland for 15 years. It's very important, this rejection of France, rejection of outward internationalism and inward nationalism of the worst possible kind. So he left the country. So this is, I think, a message for all of us. This man wanted to move out. All of us yesterday talked about the need to gravitate out in space and reach maybe India, some other dream that we can perhaps reach. to save ourselves. It's not a cosmetic search. It's something which is deeply associated with our existence, our cerebral, intellectual, emotional existence. So that is why I revisit this dialogue. It was the worst of times, actually. You remember the first line, A Tale of Two Cities by Dickens. It was the worst of times, it was the best of times. We go back to that day, the years, 100 years ago, what happened. It was the worst of times, in a way it was the best of times. Worse because the world was crumbling 100 years ago and threatening to fall in pieces. Best because there were the Rollands, the Tagores, the Gandhis, the Einsteins, the Bernard Shaws, the Freuds, the Bertrand Russells, the Albert Schweitzers, who could react and try to stem the rot. Let's see what they did. Rolland, stung by abus monstrueux que l'Europe a fait de sa puissance, that monstrous abuse that Europe made with its power during the First World War, and the discovery of latent nationalisms among his compatriots in France. He looked towards East for sustenance and light. I told you that Rolland was a very interesting person who wrote a novel called Jean-Christophe in 10 volumes about a German musician, Belgian origin. It's looking at international, the quest for international space. And before that, he wrote the biographies of musicians, painters, and then something happened, very important for all of us. Let's not forget what Aristotle said at the beginning of Nicomachean Ethics. Aristotle 384 to 322 BC. The first line was, every art and every inquiry, and similarly every action and pursuit, is taught to aim at some good. And for this reason, good has been rightly declared as something at which all things aim. All things aim for goodness. So Rolland would have been satisfied. He could have reposed on his laurels. Nobel Prize 1915. He was going to be a member of Académie Française, the membership which was refused to Victor Hugo and Charles Baudelaire. Victor Hugo was re-elected later on, but earlier on refused. Baudelaire, Académie Française said no. But this man was going to be a member, then something happened. In his own language, very important, this man, like you, a European, said, my simple silence could have ensured in Europe all the charms to which the vanity of an artist can aspire. Toutes les triomphes auxquels la vanité d'un artiste peut aspirer. I had only to bend and, as a Nobel laureate, widely read, admired all over France, translated in every country, even in India. Rolland, what did he do? I had only to bend and reap the harvest, that I listened to my conscience. I listened to my conscience. J'ai écouté ma conscience. And destroyed everything. He is saying himself in a letter to an Indian historian. Tolstoy wrote 6 letters to Rolland, the only modern writer with which Tolstoy corresponded. Tolstoy died in 1910. Such a writer, admired by contemporaries. What did he do? He wrote a book, immediately after his Nobel Prize, he wrote a book against the war. Au-dessous de la mêlée, above the mêlée. And in his own words, I destroyed with 2 hands my whole past life, my whole future. I knew that I would be slandered, disgraced, repudiated, rejected. Toute ma vie passée, toute ma vie d'avenir, rejected my whole life. I thought I'd be slandered, je serais calomnié, rejeté de la communauté, rejected the community. This is exactly what happened, and I don't regret anything, he said. Je ne regrette rien. Why? Just like he in yesterday's conference, I want to just reach out for others' hands, for survival in a world which was let down by his own country. So this is what happened. He reached out towards India, Notre Mère, our mother. I don't know. He went to Italy, met Malvida von Meysenbug, who was a friend of Nietzsche and Wagner. So he was looking for light everywhere. And then, when he realized that l'Europe tombait comme une pierre, Europe was falling like a stone, he turned towards India for sustenance and light. A friend called Cosette Badou was going to India in 1908. Rolland wrote to her, when you go to India, tell the art and the air and the water that Rolland salutes you. I'll go there in this life or the next. This is exactly what Professor Petrovich said yesterday. The dream. Let's go back to the dream for survival. While at the École Normale Supérieure, he had read the Gita. He was not a religious man, let me tell you again. He read the Gita and said, c'est un volcan. It is a volcano. He scribbled on the pages of the translation of Burnouf that it is a volcano. So that led to the discussion. What happened exactly? After his anti-war statement called Au-dessus de la mêlée, which corresponded very strangely his beautiful world, sometimes one feels, I told you it's the worst of times and the best of times, the man called Tagore, also after the Nobel Prize, decided to write against the nationalism latent in India and give his lectures on nationalism, very strongly worded. It's not true that Tagore is a mystique and Gitanjali, which won the Nobel Prize, is not his representative work. It's one of his works. Doesn't mean that he was always talking about spirituality, because he was also practical. And his most important book, I think, is two books. One is The Religion of Man, Manush Adorno, 1930, and The Crisis in Civilization. I assure you that in the West there is a mistake. Whose mistake? I don't know. The flaw of the translator. You know, there is a lot of politics in translation. The politics of translation is as bad as the politics of politics. They decide who to play, who to send in the playground, and who not to. This has been a very important point. Representation has been often corroded by the politics of translation. Very interesting that Tagore has remained a kind of prophet with an apparel from the East, talking about spirituality. But he was not that kind of person. He was a man who was always connected with life. E.M. Foster, in the epigraph to his great novel Howard's End, just used two words: only connect. Literature becomes meaningful, any text becomes meaningful if it's connected. Tagore was always telling us that. From where comes the light and the pain. I can assure you that Tagore can sometimes be more Baudelairean than Baudelaire. Very solid. It could be obscene. He dared to write anything. All kinds of things. I'm not idealizing him after so many years, but he had a range which, as a professor of English, I teach almost everything in English literature, all kinds of things, because of the constraints of the syllabus, etc., and routine. And I write extensively in Bengali, with a huge audience. Each time I write something on, say, the latest fiction in France, a debate, whatever, I know there are 100,000 readers, at least, or even more, 300,000 readers responding to me in Bengali. We have that kind of thing, that kind of atmosphere, electrifying. Certain things have been translated into Bengali before they were translated into English. So, in such a situation, I could realize that, and others also, that Tagore has not been properly represented. His plays, for example, anti-authoritarian works, his quest, his letters in Russia, for example. He'd seen Russia, he'd been there, and he said, this will not last. A kind of external imposition of a form does not exist, does not survive for long. So this man gave his nationalism lectures. Rolland wrote Au-dessus de la mêlée, above the mêlée. And as I said yesterday, he was rejected in France, and there were posters on his wall in France, Rolland, sold out, traitor, renegade. Even as he was adored in other parts of the world as great, free-willed humanist. Even if some of his chicken-hearted compatriots left him in the lodge, he earned new friends like Gorky, Hermann Hesse, Einstein, Shaw, Russell, Freud, and gradually in France, Georges Duhamel, Pierre-Jean Jouve, Louis Aragon, and René Malraux. Then, in 1919, which is known for the Treaty of Versailles, he wrote a text called La Déclaration de l'indépendance de l'esprit. This happened in Europe 98 years ago. The Declaration of the Independence of the Mind. And it was signed by people from across the world. And he sent that declaration, the Treaty of Declaration, he sent to Shankar-Niketan in India, because he had read the Gita and sent it to India. And Tagore, immediately, that was in 1919 June, there was a Jallianwala Bagh massacre, you must have known, in Punjab in Amritsar, where the British fired on 600, 700 people. Children, old people died immediately. And Tagore wrote to politicians, congressmen, nobody responded, not even Gandhi. So the whole night, 19 June, Tagore stayed awake and dashed off his letter to Lord Chelmsford, rejecting the knighthood given to him by the British. This is extraordinary man coming out of the ivory tower and showing that he has a rare part of the organ called the backbone. And immediately after the renunciation, this is not the kind of mystique prophet we talk about in the West, because of the politics of translation. He rejected more earlier than anyone in the country. Tagore, after a sleepless night, at 4 o'clock in the morning, dashed up the letter. Finished. And then, 2 days later, this is coincidence, 98 years ago, a letter came from Rolland. And Rolland wrote to Tagore, a number of free minds. This is important, as I said, because once again, memory can serve as a remedy for evil. And for our own quest for light and peace in troubled times. Rolland wrote on 10th April 1919. By the way, this is the first reading of this letter anywhere in the world. I've translated it and reading it for the first time in the history of mankind in English. 100 years after it was written, 98. Dear sir, Rolland, just imagine coming out of his cell, writing to somebody in the other part of the hemisphere, the beginning of a fascinating cross-cultural interface between two streams of thought, which has never really happened in that way. So seriously, Rolland wrote, a number of free minds which feel the urgency to react against the nearly universal oppression and servitude of intellect have drawn up the project of the Declaration of the Independence of Spirit. I enclose here a copy. Would you honor us, sir, by joining this project? He wrote to me. It's my dream to see the union of these two hemispheres of the spirit. This is what we talked about yesterday. And this is the letter, translated from English, from French and English by me. It's my dream to see the union of these two hemispheres of the spirit. I wish that henceforth the intellect of Asia will take a more active part in the expression of thought of Europe. It's my dream to see the union of these hemispheres. I admire you for contributing to it more than anyone else. How could you understand? I assure you that Tagore was in the bestsellers list after the Nobel Prize. First non-white, non-Westerner to win the Nobel Prize in 1913. And the first 27 years of the Nobel Prize, he was the only man from the other world. And he wrote to Tagore, I admire you for contributing to it more than anyone else. Allow me to say in conclusion how dear to us are your wisdom and your art. Please accept my profound admiration. And then he sent him la Déclaration de l'indépendance de l'esprit, the Declaration of the Independence of Spirit. Toilers of the spirit, companions scattered across the world, separated by the armies, by censorship, and the hatred of foreign nations for 5 years, we appeal to you at this hour when barriers are crumbling and frontiers are reopening, to reorient our fraternal union, a new union which is more solid and convincing than ever before. Just imagine an author of Jean-Christophe and L'Homme Enchanté in Chapter Soul, and plays like Danton and Robespierre, now puts aside his books and tries to write an appeal for universal harmony. And Tagore answered, and this is Tagore's letter. This is Tagore's letter, his own handwriting. I got this copy from Bibliothèque Nationale de France, strangely not yet available for the world audience. And he wrote, it's very interesting, immediately after the Jallianwala Bagh massacre and the rejection of knighthood, he gets a letter. He was very angry at the spur of the moment. He reacted, and the letter said, when my mind was steeped in the gloom of the thought that the lesson of the late war had been lost, and that the people were trying to perpetuate their hatred, anger, and greed into the same organized menace of the world which threatened themselves with disaster, your letter came and cheered me with its message of hope. The truths that save us have always been uttered by the few and rejected by the many, and have trumped through their failures. It's enough for me to know that the higher consciousness of Europe has been able to assert itself in the voice of one of her choicest spirits, through the ugly clamors of passionate politics, and I gladly hasten to accept your invitation to join the ranks of the free souls in Europe who have conceived the project of a declaration of independence of the mind. Kindly accept my thanks for the noble words with which we've introduced the French translation of the passages from my message to Japan. In that text, Rolland had incorporated excerpts from Tagore's anti-nationalism lectures in 1916 at the University of Tokyo. So you see, without knowing each other, without meeting each other, the two Nobel laureates, 1913 and 14 there was no Nobel Prize, they were in the same wavelength. Ils étaient sur la même longueur d'onde. This is strange. Remember that India was under the British, and no British writer strived to reach him in the same way. And then the dialogue began. It was, as I said, a cross-cultural encounter, a fireside conversation, not only between two streams of thought, but two historical and cultural discourses. It's not a fashionable dialogue of a global summit. It was something which was really suffused with blood. This was a story we dreamt about yesterday, and I'm sure all of us do all the time in these moments of crisis and civilization. Common shared space, an emotional space, a platform which seemed to elude us every day. And I face extremely disturbing questions in France. Qui est Romain Rolland? Who is this Romain Rolland? Who is this man? Who is this guy? Somebody asked me in France. Who is this guy? And so let me just tell you who the guy was. Novelist, playwright, musicologist, biographer, cultural activist, who secretly donated all his prize money of Nobel Prize secretly to the Red Cross. As La Rochefoucauld said in his famous maxims in the 17th century, heroism done behind the curtain is true heroism. He never told anyone he did it. He himself was ill, had to spend days in the nursing home, who had a slight limp in his leg after an road accident in 1910. Divorced man, unhappy, financial problems. He donated all his money to the Red Cross. Winner of Grand Prix de l'Académie Française, 2 doctoral theses on origins of modern lyric theatre and the history of opera, member of École Française de Rome, professor of history of art at École Normale Supérieure. I think he can still be mind control of us, this man. Professor of music at École des Hautes Études, Collège de France, author of Jean-Christophe. He became a world citizen. In exile in his own country, from his own country, but a world citizen. What kind of man was this Romain Rolland? The French poet Pierre Jean Jouve described him in his biography, 1919, around the time when Rolland's Indian chapter began. Romain Rolland is tall, slim, slightly stooping. I'm giving you a physical description of the man because Romain Rolland, in all his biographies, he's the only great novelist of Europe of that stature. I found 43 volumes of the complete works of Rolland in Japan 2 years ago. New prints. I've seen it everywhere, in Italy, in America, in our country, of course, in China, in other places, in Germany, of course. What kind of man was he? All his biographies, Beethoven, Millet, Handel, the musician, of Gandhi, Ramakrishna, and Vivekananda. He described the physical traits of the man. Minute, it's almost like a cinematic description of the man. For example, at the beginning of his work on Gandhi, 1924, the first book on Gandhi, and the most important in my opinion, widely available, he describes the ears of Gandhi as if with a camera which is completely objective and impersonal. Very interesting way. And trying to understand the man from his looks, read his face, read his fingers, his body movement. Very interesting way. So let me give a similar kind of description. Of course, I can't go into that kind of detail. Robert Rolland is tall, said Pierre Jean Jouve in his biography, slim, slightly stooping since his accident, which nearly killed him in 1910, dressed in a somber, elegant, and austere costume. He sat in front of a small table in a cubicle filled with books in Montparnasse, Paris, and wrote with nervous hands words which seemed to be flying like wings, with wings. Or sometimes seated in an armchair, legs crossed, his bony hands placed under his chin, he spoke in a soft, resonating and persuasive voice. Il parle peu parce qu'il s'y voit. He spoke little, for he knew how to see. And a face as engaging and delicate, comme nos ciels français, like our French skies, said Pierre Jean Jouve. Robert Rolland reminded others of a portrait of Shakespeare in the 1623 edition of Haggard and Blount, London, or of that of a Roman cardinal painted by Raphael, with sea blue eyes, grave, pure, with an eagle look, lean, tall, with a face that was pale and yellow, with eyes flashing like steel. Writes Stefan Zweig in his 21 biography of Rolland. Robert Rolland, Der Mann und das Werk, Robert Rolland, The Man and the Work, 1921 by Stefan Zweig. Rolland's admirer. The classmates in school called him un volcan sous la glace. A volcano under the ice, covered with ice. Une froideur brûlante, a burning coldness. So deeply shaken by the war, he turned towards Indian space, as I said, our mother. He read Ananda Kumaraswamy's book called Arts and Crafts of India in Ceylon, and the Bhagavad Gita. He was not a religious man, indeed, and he said, like us, perhaps yesterday, cet univers est trop riche. This universe is too rich, trop plein, too full. Ma poitrine éclate. My chest is going to burst. Il est trop petit pour le contenir. My chest is too small to contain all this. And he was afraid of dying before he explored the higher horizon. Just imagine, after completing 10 volumes of Jean-Christophe, which made him the Sinosophe of romance. And the last page of the 10th volume of Jean-Christophe, so exciting, is called La Nouvelle Journée, the New Day. And at the last page of Jean-Christophe, because the literary quest is the same quest as that of sociology or history, we converge. The same quest for light. Now, the last line of the book, as Saint Christophe, Saint Christopher, crosses the river with a child in his shoulder. He crosses the river, Christopher, and asks the child, Nous voici arrivés. We have arrived. Last line of the 10th volume of Jean-Christophe. We have arrived. L'enfant, comme tu es lourd. Child, how heavy you are. Qui es-tu? Who are you? And the child said, the last line of the book, Je suis le jour qui va naître. I am the day which is going to be born. Last line of Jean-Christophe. and he finds out that new dawn in the east. And then the quest began with Tagore. And it was the same quest of the renewal of the human condition. La même quête du renouveau de la condition humaine. La même fin pour la vérité. The same thirst for truth. Pour la justice. For justice. La même adhésion complète à la vie. The same fidelity to life. And Rolland would write to a poet who was a disciple of Tagore, I admire your Tagore because in him, the only person in the world, in him I can already feel the vibrations of human harmony, les vibrations de l'harmonie. So they tried to build a bridge. And despite the hostility of the French, he went on. Rolland and Tagore were tormented by the same conflicts between openness and rigidity, between life and death. When Tagore laid foot on French soil in 1921, very popular as you know, he was mobbed everywhere at that time. Everybody thought he was a messiah from the East. In Germany he was mobbed, everywhere in the world. The first, in Japan, the first man he wished to see was not his famous translator André Gide. Gide had translated Gita into French. And if Gita, his English translation by W.B. Yeats, the great W.B. Yeats, poet, probably the finest poet of the last century in English, Irish poet, Yeats said, it's more beautiful than anything you can ever write. He said candidly in the introduction to Gita. But an André Gide translated, a classic example of Gide translating something for the larger public. Because Saint-Jean-Perse, the French Nobel laureate in 1960, regarded by Aragon as the greatest French poet of the last century, Saint-Jean-Perse had convinced Gide that his translation of Tagore could change the mindscape of France for all time. Like Edgar Allan Poe's translation by Baudelaire changed French poetry for all time. So he said, do it, please. Tagore va tout changer. Tagore is going to change everything. This man translated, André Gide. But Tagore did not want to meet Gide. He did not want to meet the famous people. He wanted to meet a man called Rolland. He went to Montparnasse with his son. Just imagine, a man, blue-eyed man, so beautiful. Helen Keller touched him and said, oh God, he's the most beautiful man I've ever seen. Rolland wrote, il est trop beau, too beautiful. Such a man was looking for the house of Rolland. And everybody said, typical French style, just imagine. All this is a fact today. Each time you try to find out new ways of harmony, you're in crisis. But the battle is on. And so 100 years ago, 1921, Tagore was looking for the house of Rolland in Montparnasse, 162 Montparnasse, and everybody said, I don't know. Why? Because he had written a book against war, therefore anti-French, because France had Alsace-Lorraine at stake at the war. So, everybody said, je sais pas, I don't know. But Tagore said, I have to. And finally they met, meeting between the East and the West, in Paris. But Rolland was not a Frenchman. He was a citizen of the world, a European. Biographer of Tolstoy, biographer of Beethoven. And the main character is not a Frenchman, but a German, a European mind. And so, they met. And what did they talk about the first time when they met in April 1921? Not about the world crisis. The world was 1922. Eliot published The Wasteland. The world was, in English language, burning, 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 burning. London Bridge was falling down, falling down, falling down. And the two met, two streams of thought. An author of Jean-Christophe, the author of Home and the World, Tagore. They met. And they talked about Bach. Johann Sebastian Bach. Music. Because I told you, India was an idea, even harmony is an idea. So, one must respond in that level. Otherwise it doesn't work. Otherwise it becomes politics. And so what happened? The dialogue began, and they talked about Bach. Just imagine the world is burning, and two of them are talking about Bach. And then, the other things. Tagore sang his songs. And he wrote to the historian Kalidashnag, of all men I met in the West, he met everyone. Everyone. Barnard Shaw, Russell, this, that, everyone. Thomas Mann. But he said, of all the men I met in the West, it was Rolland who struck me as the nearest to my heart and most akin to my spirit. Men like Rolland had accepted voluntarily the career of penance and purification. He uses the word tapasya. Rolland had gone through, this is Tagore writing. After, say, the rejection of knighthood, this man, and the signing of the declaration of his mind, and their first meeting, he writes, writers like Rolland, I'm not talking about Rolland as a Frenchman, let me repeat again, but as a symbol of Europe, that Rolland had accepted voluntarily the care of penance and purification for the welfare of humanity as a whole. For them, this is very, very important, there does not exist the distinction between their country and the universe. That is why they are being hounded by the champions of patriotism and nationalism. But my whole heart is with Rolland and his small band of colleagues. The ultimate victory is ours. Note the use of the pronoun. They. My whole heart is with Rolland and his colleagues. The ultimate victory is theirs? No. Unconsciously he writes ours. He brackets himself with Rolland. Unconsciously he uses the word ours. The victory is ours. At a moment of crisis in civilization, look at the dialogue. Words fly with wings. The ultimate victory is ours, for we are on the side of truth, wherein lies liberty and emancipation. Look at the inner eye that is opening out of two writers who left their ivory tower and tried to gravitate towards each other. Rolland wrote, I was struck by the closeness. J'étais frappé de la parenté, closeness of Indian thought with the greatest minds of Greece, of eternal Europe, which have nourished him. The only difference, I believe, is that Indian philosophy is more substantial. They taught the same things, but had greater depth. They had greater depth and completeness, and is coached in a more splendid form. Look, this is not Orientalism. This man is coming out and admiring. I don't know of anybody short who said that. I don't know of any other French writer who said that. It's not easy. And he did it. Someone has to show the way. And he said, depth and magnitude are distinctive of the Indian genius. But we seem to have thought the same things. It was our thought. I think this is what Professor Petrovich said in the plenary session, the Indian dream. So, by 1924, he had completed his book on Gandhiji. Just imagine, there was no material available. And he would have remained a man who was fighting minimum clothes, against British Empire, with non-violence. It was marginalized, had no importance internationally. But this man came out and wrote about him. Who would do it? This is post-colonialism at the best. So look at this man, what he did. And he did that. He said, the time is savage and cruel, full of devastations. We have to struggle against ancient ideals, as I said yesterday, the dying gods. Contre les dieux mourants, against dying gods, against millions of eyeless minds. We have to establish new gods and new humanity. And there is no reason to think that the new man will come from Europe. I've seen superior men in the East, in India, for example. So, this is very interesting. And then Rolland wrote a comparison between Tagore and Gandhi. Very interesting. This is, I think, one of the most objective analysis ever, because the comparison is inevitable for our country. There's a book, as I said yesterday, a book called The Mahatma and the Poet. You know, the name Mahatma was given by Tagore, the grand soul, the great soul, but they never agreed on principal issues. But when Tagore was very ill and he was stooping like this, 1927, old man, he went to see Gandhiji was on there in Calcutta. And he was carried in a chair. He said, carry me, just... Tagore was a very dignified person. Very good looking, very self-sufficient, and wouldn't like the humiliation of being carried in a chair upstairs. He was carried in a chair upstairs. He said, I have to meet Mahatma Gandhi. Look at the respect they had for each other. And so, that was 1937, December, 1st December. Now, comparison, look at the comparison. This comparison you will find, there are many biographies of Tagore. One of the best is an English translation by Krishna Kripalani. Krishna Kripalani was the first president of the Indian Academy of Letters after independence. And it's a book called Rabindranath Tagore, the poet. And there he lifted Rolland comparison of the two. Just literally lifted it to use in his book. Because it's not easy to compare the two. But I can't go into the details. Grosso modo, he said, I can't help admiring more and more the saint and the sage. Unique happiness for India to have possessed at the same time two great men, each expressing a facet of the highest truth. There is hardly anyone who is worthier than Gandhi in the international gallery of heroes. There is certainly no one in Europe. Certainement, il n'y a personne en Europe who comes anywhere near him. And despite the reservations one may have about certain ideas of Gandhiji, and their Gandhi said, and their dangerous misinterpretations by their disciples, je l'admire, je le respecte. I admire and respect him. He is therefore the living symbol, le symbole vivant de l'esprit of light. As I said yesterday, it is the symbol which matters. He said the cross did not save humanity, Rolland wrote, but the cross showed the way to salvation. Same with Gandhiji. Il est pour nous le symbole vivant de l'esprit, de la lumière et de l'harmonie, le grand oiseau libre, the free bird, like Tagore, who floats in the midst of tempests. Now, Rolland's, quest in Indian space was not a kind of superficial quest. He wanted to know everything, every line. He read geography of Calcutta, for example, tried to understand the mind. For example, in a letter he wrote to an Indian historian, Gandhi says he's a Sanatani Hindu. Could you explain? Vous pouvez m'expliquer ce que c'est? And during the bloody riots of Chauri Chaura, he learns that policemen were burnt in a thana and asks, is it the name of a particular building? What is a thana? Please write to me immediately. So, this is very, very important. But the quest did not finish there. There were jewels. In 1926, Tagore was invited by Mussolini in Italy. And I don't know, Tagore was interested in man. He wrote a play called The Red Orientals, where he imagined a savior, political messiah of sorts, who would be thunderous, but there was flower inside thunder. And maybe he thought that Mussolini needed to be excellent, and he went there. And he was trapped, misused. He did not know Italian, and there was information in newspapers that Tagore had supported Mussolini. But Mussolini had absolutely no idea. Sorry, Tagore had no idea about that. And then there was heartbreak. Rolland tried to convince Tagore that there was massacre in Italy, and there was crisis. At that moment, that is June, July 1926, then something happened. A man called Dhangopal Mukherjee, this is important, Dhangopal Mukherjee committed suicide. An Indian who lived in America, wrote a book called The Face of Silence. See, a man who is in the Indian space, admiring the obvious icons like Tagore and Gandhi, but going beyond that, he's dejected after the Tagore-Mussolini controversy. Continued to admire Tagore because he realized that Tagore was misled somewhere. And Tagore confessed that he was, but he found out another space. And I have to, this is very, very important, still went on to understand the human mind of India, the eternal India. I told you yesterday, and you know it better than me, that India is an idea. And so, he just tried to understand this idea, and he wrote about two Indian philosophers. Ramakrishna, an illiterate man from Calcutta, who was a temple priest, bare feet, temple priest. I'll give you the pictures. Sri Ramakrishna. Of course, this we know, but Sri Ramakrishna, and the other man is his disciple Swami Vivekananda. Remember that he was not a religious man, quote unquote. For him, this is very, very important. Ramakrishna, this is very important, in his 1929 biography. I saw the manuscript. It's in Basel University in Switzerland. No, 900-page manuscript. Just imagine, without going to India. Many writers who came to India, who traveled to India from the time of Tavernier and others, many of them, could never write with what Rolland could achieve without ever traveling to India. This is strange. The homework he did. I saw his library. Now the whole library from Switzerland had been removed to Paris, Bibliothèque Nationale, and the whole library is there. They've recreated the library, the National Library, and there are 700 books on India. Just imagine he was writing his second great novel, 7-volume novel, The Enchanted Soul. He was rewriting his biography of Beethoven. He was writing his play, The Trump of Reason. And he was writing his play on Robespierre. At the same time, he could read 700 books on India to understand Ramakrishna. And for him, just a few minutes, j'ai puisé un peu de cette eau sacrée pour étancher la grande soif du monde. He said, I have drawn a little of this sacred water to slake the great thirst of the world. This is extraordinary. And what did he do? Ramakrishna said something extraordinary. He was a product of the Bengal Renaissance of 19th century, which produced Raja Ramamohan Rai, Tagore, his brother, his father, Swami Vivekananda, many Michael Bush, Dr. the great poet. It was a kind of Renaissance which was unthinkable. It was a great upsurge, and all windows are thrown open, and we Bengalis, I mean, of course, not being nationalistic, learned to sort of read the world. All windows are thrown open. Everybody was necessarily trilingual. 4 or 5 languages, part of life. English, yes. You read also Comte, French. You read also this, that. So this is the kind of mindset we had. And he found in Ramakrishna, this man, a confluence. Well, the confluence of Sava and Dani would know that what a confluence. The confluences are what you're looking for. It's a confluence of ideas, and he found in him. Just imagine, nobody did it, even in India. He said, "Don't ignore him." This man said, "Jotelmont, Totelbot." How many more the ways, the more ways of the more opinions, the more ways to reach the truth. And he compared him, believe me, an Indian historian said, "Why are you interested in Ramakrishna the priest?" And he said, "Don't ignore him. For me, he's as important as Christ. He's, look at the line, a magic fruit of a mature moment of mankind. Magic fruit of mature moment." And he said, I compare Ramakrishna with Raphael and Mozart. Nobody ever did it. Raphael the painter, who assembled all the qualities of Renaissance, and Mozart. Just imagine Ramakrishna being compared at the international level with Mozart and Raphael. And he made his disciple, he wrote about his disciple Vivekananda, Swami Vivekananda. Look at this man. So it's not only Gandhiji and Tagore. Look at this man who died at the age of 39. Ramakrishna died of cancer in the mouth at the age of 49. And this man, 39, and he said, c'est un brasier d'énergie spirituelle. An energy. Brasier. Qu'est-ce que c'est brasier en français, in English?
Brasier, je ne sais pas ce que c'est brasier.
An oven of energy. A furnace of energy. Spiritual energy. Just imagine, at a moment of crisis in humanity. It was not a kind of cosmetic pep talk in a seminar. It's a search. And now he said, before I finish, on Ramakrishna, I'm just summing up. He said, I do not isolate Christ or Buddha, Ramakrishna and Vivekananda, from the great army of the spirit of the world, marching on in their own time. I shall try in the course of my book to do justice to these personalities of genius who during the last century have sprung up in reawakened India, reviving the ancient energies of the country and bringing about a spring of thought. Le fleuve rentre dans la mer, the river re-enters the sea of the world mind.
Flame.
So, furnace, I think, yeah, flame. At this instance, from their differences, I refuse to see the dust of battle, said Rolland. At this distance, the hedges between the fields melt into an immense expanse. I can only see the same river, the majestic chemin qui marche, a road which marches, as in the words of Pascal, a chemin qui marche. So he and he are part of the road that moves, le chemin qui marche. And about Vivekananda, this is very interesting. He called him, the man with the lion's heart, the spirit with widest wings. What did Vivekananda do? He spoke about Vedanta. And he believed that work is the religion of man which can transport us to spirituality. Transportation through work and equal distribution of justice. He called him the spirit with the widest wings. Look at the search, nobody would have done it. Too Colemonté, too disdainful and snobbish. Who cares? I have our own sense. I don't bother, I don't give a damn. But he says, even in moments of rest, upon its bosom, the sails of his ship were filled with every wind that blew. Artfully cries, the sufferings of the age fluttered round him like a flight of the famished gods. I compare him with Beethoven and Schiller. For him, as for Beethoven, it was action was the root of all virtues. He was energy personified. So he talks about the arrow of Vivekananda. The synthesis of his great opposing forces took years of struggle, consuming his very life. But the flame of his fire is still alive today. From his ashes, like those of the phoenix of the old, has sprung anew the consciousness of India. He remained flesh and bones. Although absolute detachment bathed the heights of his mind, the rest of his body remained immersed in life and action. His whole edifice bears this double impress. The basement is the nursery of apostle of truth and social service who mix in the life of the people as the movement of times. But the summit is Ara Maxima, the lantern of the dome, the spin of the cathedral, the ashrama of all ashramas, the Advaita built in the Himalayas, when the two hemispheres, the west and east, meet at the confluence of all mankind in absolute unity. If Rolland repeatedly called Ramakrishna a Mozartian symphony, he knew that it was Swami Vivekananda who set out to build the Civitas Dei, the city of mankind, on the foundation of the golden concrete of that symphony. It's regrettable, writes Rolland, that the name and the words of Vivekananda has not been invoked as often as I would have wished in Europe. And Rolland mentioned that Gandhiji went on pilgrimage with his wife to Belur Ramakrishna Mission for Vivekananda's birth anniversary festival in January 1921. The tenacious and unwavering moderation of Gandhiji's action is mixed with politics and sometimes becomes their leader. But Vivekananda's heroic passion rejects politics of all kinds, so that the followers of Ramakrishna have kept themselves aloof from the campaigns of Gandhiji. When Gandhiji came to see Rolland in Switzerland, Rolland raised the question of the sages, and Gandhiji didn't admit that Ramakrishna is highly esteemed in India, that he wanted to see Vivekananda. So what is important is the quest is very important, and as we know that Rolland married for the second time after his divorce in 1901 a Russian-French woman called Maria Gulacheva in 1934, and people believe that she may have been a Soviet spy. It's not been established, but by that time Rolland was gradually moving out. He called himself un homme complètement désintéressé et complètement libre, a man completely disinterested, completely free. Now he's moving out into the Soviet space. Very soon, after the Moscow trial in 1937 and the disastrous German-Soviet pact, he withdrew. Rolland now went back to his lonely space. He received the news of Tagore's death and he said, there is darkness, darkness, darkness. Remember that they walked alone, but they were not alone. There was, if you look at the discourse, one can find traces of real tears strewn all over this discourse like pearls. Thank you.
inspiring lecture. And now I would like the audience to ask questions, raise questions again.
I'm sorry I overstepped the mark. It took longer than I expected.
No.
I'm sorry, but I thought that we have time today. Anyway. So I thought it should have been presented somewhere, this quest for harmony, because this dialogue is forgotten. How can we forget it? Thank you. Yes.
Goran Nikolic from the War Institute.
Excuse me, I am very interested in languages of India. My question is about it, about roles of Bengal and Hindi in today India. Does in primary school, does in Bengal, for example, in primary school, is Bengal only obligated language for people?
Yeah.
In facts, too, is Bengal only obligated? Does Bollywood films are titled in Bengal, for example? And does sub-regional languages
No,
as Bihar has does the lectures in Bihar are in Bihar or Hindi, for example?
No, that's a very interesting question, because let's try to understand that there's a crisis in many ways. We've lived this crisis, and that's part of our existence. It's a confederation of languages, cultures, and yet we have really remained. It's not a kind of prime ministerial pep talk, superficial kind of gesture. What I want to say is that there is an inner unity. There is no doubt about it. Gandhiji would come over to Bengal, or when Tagore spent some of his time in Gujarat and Ahmedabad. We live together. We have lived together. European Union, I don't know. You've tried to show the way too in your own way, but we have lived together for centuries. Let's not forget that each region has its language, but we don't call them regional languages. They're Indian languages. The moment you use epithet regional, make it sort of inferior. We don't. For me, it is not regional or sub-regional. It's Indian language. For example, you are Anantamukti wrote in Kannada, and we don't say he wrote in a regional language. The greatest film director in India, Satyajit Ray, the greatest film director of India, one of the greatest, according to Kurosawa. As important as the sun and the moon, and for Fellini and Antonioni and Godard and one of the greatest film directors in the history of the world, cinema, he made his films in Bengali. Pothe Panchali was made in Bengali. So I don't call them regional, but it's a very important observation anyway, because your understanding is very profound, I know that. The influence of English has come back. It was not a problem during independence, but now more and more with Anglicization, Americanization, globalization, there is a lure, the television channels, there's a lure of linguistic imperialism, and there is attraction towards English. So there are basically primary mediums, primary schools, Bengali is taught for the mass, but for the elite somewhere we have English, only English. But now last year the government has made Bengali compulsory again. When I was a student I learned both, no problem. Bengali was the first language, English was the second. It's always like that. For Amartya Sen it was the second language English, first language Bengali. For Satyajit Ray, for Ravi Shankar, for example, the great musician, first language Bengali, second language is English. So we were world citizens from the beginning. It helped us. We became part of the world. At the same, everyone, we have a great scholar in front of us. Professor Bhatt, he represents one of the finest, most important universities in the country. Same everywhere, Kannada in Karnataka, and English. Then came the crisis, English. Then came a strange crop of writers, Indian writing in English, which jeopardized everything. Bengali writers, Tamil writers, Malayalam writers, Hindi writers took a back seat, because when you write in English, you get international fame immediately. So inferior writers like Amitabh Ghosh, I'm not denigrating him, I know him, he's a friend. We speak with each other in Bengali, nothing else, not in English. Amitabh Ghosh is very well known, Shadow Lines, In an Antique Land, etc. But in the Bengali scenario, for example, I'm talking about Bengali because it's my language, I could have spoken about other languages too. Amitabh Ghosh I would have placed among the first 500 writers. But when he writes in English, immediately he's read all over the world. That's a crisis. Indian writing in English has disrupted everything. Quicker success. Even I feel like writing in English. There are times I write in English, and I wrote not so important books. I brought something, for example, this is on Eliot, where the dreams cross tears in French poetry, and I wrote in English, and immediately after that I was working in Oxford at Humphrey Book Library, and I found this book. It travels faster, but my books in Bengali do not. So suddenly your question becomes relevant. Suddenly our own languages, Indian languages, have become regional. It's a crisis for the family. Yeah. Because it's quicker to get success through English. So we've moved to a space which is very dangerous. It's kind of post-colonial space which is colonized. English is a vehicle for us of colonization. So there are contradictions, and suddenly English has taken the front seat, and there's a crisis. But we'll overcome, don't worry. Yes? Please. Please.
Hindi, okay.
Hindi, the huge population speaks Hindi, but I think Professor Bhatt will be in a position to answer. English has even overtaken that. Professor Petrovich yesterday.
Hindi is primarily being damaged by Hindi people only. Hindi speaking people, they prevent Hindi from spreading out. When you have to, suppose you have a chair here for Hindi. If you invite somebody from Hindi belt, professor of Hindi, to make an appointment, he'll ensure that his or her student is taken in, who may be a third-rate product. How can he be do any kind of service to that land? That's the reality. In the Hindi belt also you have mushroom growth of English medium schools. Even villages have English medium schools. So it's a case is that we have not been able to decolonize our minds.
Which I thought it's not the case here. It's a very pleasant experience here. You always use Serbian language. I went to the bookshops, Serbian books all the time. But English, your English is highest class. So that kind of parallel discourse we had in the 19th century, in the 20th century. But now, after globalization, there is a crisis. That is the irony of the whole thing.
Before 47, during freedom, the so-called freedom struggle, it's anti-England, obviously, people would say English is the language of Saturn. Or what do you call it, Shaitan? Shaitan as we call it Shaitan in Indian language. Saturn, S-A-T-A-N, how do you name that? Satan, okay. So, those leaders would speak out against English. They would say that soon after we attain independence, common people, we'll have our own languages, not languages, through national languages. And after 47, English occupied that space of language of the wisest. People would tell us that English is window to West, window to knowledge, window to science. So that's what's happening. This is discourse. Language is a very fundamentally, being damaged, indigenous language, native language, by our leadership, including teachers, university teachers like me. generation. We have to coin terms to call English writing as hybrid literature. And when you write in language, we call that authentic literature, because you are rooted.
So there's a crisis. That way your question is very
But
important.
hybrid literature
Indian literature suddenly becomes
authentic is not.
original, quote
Yeah.
unquote, which is not the case here. The way you did it, we did it too. But after globalization, this rupture has happened. So ironic, but so true.
Misha, and then I will reserve the opportunity also to ask a question.
Well, thanks again for absolutely inspiring question. You have complimented us for yesterday's contribution and discussion and so on. I have to return definitely, because it's that very hardly one can see so passionate personal involvement in the work as you have shown us today. I mean, beside all the great work and knowledge, it's really pleasure of seeing somebody who is so much putting himself totally within his lecture and still basing that on a very emotional and passionate approach. In that sense, thank you very much. I had a couple of issues to ask you which are connected with your today's presentation. Recently, the first one about this, let me say, pacifistic tradition. Actually, it's very interesting that recently I had the chance for the first time to read Die Welt von gestern from Stefan Zweig's famous book, his autobiography, The World of Yesterday, in which somebody who was very close to Rolland and who also thought that Rolland is one of the greatest, and probably the greatest intellectual at that time in the world and so on. And you remember actually when they were in 1915 trying in Switzerland to make it as some kind of brotherhood of pacifistic intellectuals of Europe, people who wanted to simply avoid not only going into trenches, but fighting with the other, they thought, compatriots of the Europe, because they thought that Europe was their basic sense of identity. They didn't want to enter internationalistic fights and so on and so on. So remember that it was very interesting move when they tried to make, to publish their magazine, and they wanted to gather as many of the people who were moving from time to time, and even if I remember, Stefan Zweig moved to Switzerland as well after a certain time, and has spent the whole time until the end of the world in Switzerland and so on. So in that sense, it's very interesting. Yeah, no, it's the Second World War. No, I'm speaking about the First World War, actually. He moved to Switzerland, and he stayed there until the end, and then he returned to Salzburg. And then you're right, actually, when again the tragedy started, he moved to South America, and he finished in Brazil. But actually, it's very interesting that a pacifistic tradition of pacifism in Europe was more or less developed within that period, actually, and it's not the case. It's not the only by the chance, actually, that they have tried to connect themselves already at that time, as you have shown, with India tradition, and the way, especially Gandhiji and his work was presented and so on. So even after that, I mean, in the 60s, when there was new revival of the interest for India, together when the time of Vietnam War was, I think it's again not by the chance actually that Europeans or Americans have also tried to build on this tradition, making it on spirituality, and somehow India was perceived as a place of peace or ahimsa or something which was, like being opposite of European crazy and bloody 20th century so on. So coming from that perspective, that was my first question actually. How vivid is this, if we could say, pacifistic tradition in Europe and how alive is it? I mean, speaking about the political theory of general approach about the institution, because we yesterday spoke that when we perceive today's India, Ahimsa is very respected as a tradition of Gandhiji, but on the other hand, India is being quite, in some sense, militarized nation today, which is perceiving itself as very dangerous by the China or Pakistan or many other things. So how do you generally perceive within your, how should I say, institutional and public life, this, if I may say, division a bit between necessity of the endangerment which is forcing you to build aircrafts and strong army, and on the other hand some kinds of tradition which is still connected with Gandhiji and with all this tradition for 19th century. I'm not sure if I'm precise, but actually how basically is this pacifistic tradition still very much alive among India, and if Europe today's if today's European intellectuals could really again search for India as the source of spirituality and of anti-war, anti-military mood, like they did from Rolland until the 60s or I don't know, 70s and so on. And the other thing is, of course, you mentioned Harish Shankar recently, who have done quite a huge, I think, amazing job in promoting Indian music from the 60s. Of course, his work with the Beatles.
There too, he was connection with East and the West. He played with Eddie Menuhin, for example, and so on.
Absolutely, you know.
East and the West.
I adore Trilo Gurtu, for example, who is absolutely great percussion player. He played a couple of times in Belgrade, and so on and so on. In that sense, today, when you perceive how India is being, at least in popular culture or in theory or in writing, being accepted at the Western world, I will be happy to hear your perception. Are you satisfied with the way India is presented from 60s, 70s on in Indian culture? Because sometimes, you know, there are some manipulation, some really misperception, and so on and so on. Confusion and so on. And this is my second question, just if you could comment and give us, for example, good or bad examples of, let me say, presentation, perception or misperception of Indian position in contemporary Western world. And thank you once more for really giving us so much today.
Well, I think your question was more than a question. I think it was kind of political commentary on our evolution and our present position. I don't know. I'm as confused as most of us are. It's never easy to draw any conclusion. For example, I think the same thing was discussed yesterday. To a certain extent, we tried to answer this question yesterday too. I still believe, I'm not being nationalistic, I'm not being foolishly patriotic. I think I am an internationalist like all educated Indians, and like you, all educated Serbians, for example. Any educated man belongs to the US. Otherwise, he's not educated. For example, there's a beautiful line in one of Tagore's novels called Gita, The Last Poem. He was a novelist too. He wrote some of the most beautiful short stories, which I think sometimes surpass those of Chekhov and Professor. So lyrical. There's always an inner flow of light everywhere. If you read the sacred texts, not only the Gita, but important plays of Sanskrit theatre, important Gitanjali, Tagore's Nobel Prize winning book, his novel Home and the World. There's always a movement from the home to the world. It's always been that. Buddha, for example, saw old age, he saw death, and then started his meditation and contemplation of mankind. and then reached a state of mind where he could look at the world, an overview of the world. So I think the journey has been in the Upanishads, says Chareviti, let's move on, move on. All is movement, says the Upanishads. So you see, there has been the Indian ethos of movement towards light. As Rolland said, the river goes to the sea, always to the larger ocean. It's always been like that in the text. It was not artificial or fake. It's been like that. And in some of the great, I was referring to the music of Ravi Shankar, for example, Isladali Akbar Khan, all the greats, the film director Ray. Please see Gautam Panchali if you can. You see a master. Why Kurosawa called him the great? I mean, if you read Paul Rother's film till now, the great history of world cinema, he said Ray and Kurosawa could achieve what Hollywood never did. We had great film directors like Ray, Katak, Sen. There has been a constant attempt to place India in the middle of the universe, to judge it in the context of the world, always in the middle of it, in the context, never judged separately. We've been connected with the world, and therefore the crisis, yes, the crisis is always there. Let's not forget the father, I told you yesterday, the father of the nation was killed. We started our journey of independence by killing the man who brought about independence. So the contradictions are always there everywhere. And let's not forget that there's a surface area of 3,287,000 square kilometers. 3,287,032 square kilometers. 1,652 languages. It's not easy. It's a kind of flowing laboratory, ethnic laboratory. We have existed. Look at the network. If you look at the intertextuality, it's amazing. So we have carried on. There will always be strains in this, the violence, the riots, for example, in Gujarat, the Gurdwara riots. It's an example, for example. We can assure you that is, I agree with Amartya Sen, that is not the true spirit. Stray incidents do not prove the rule. I believe, I'm not a politician, so I'm not going to project the best image of India, but I can assure you that somewhere, I think Udayan and Professor Bhatt will also agree, that somewhere at the bottom of the heart, I know that there is a kind of eclectic mindset. There is a true secular fabric somewhere. There are attempts to dislocate it, disorient it, political parties which try to play with the secular fabric of the nation. Violence has been there. Yesterday, I think, when you mentioned that Indira Gandhi and Rajiv Gandhi came here, both of them were assassinated. Look at assassinations. It's strange. Gandhi assassinated, Indira Gandhi assassinated, then Rajiv Gandhi assassinated. It's a contradiction. And yet the contradiction cannot mar the spirit and the soul.
It's not a contradiction, it's a rule.
Yes.
It's a rule.
Yes.
Because, also in Serbia, the man who brought to us freedom, Karađorđe, was killed.
Yes.
This is one more, among striking similarities between India and Serbia. Also, Prince Mikhailov also got the Belgrade for trust from Turks. He was also killed. Everyone who brought freedom to this world is killed.
Yes.
Because empires always strikes back.
That's right. I think that's also.
Yes, it's a rule. It's a rule. It's normal. And I found out also another striking similarity between India and Serbia. Several times here during the lecture, you apologize that you are and try to persuade us that you are not nationalist. It is that sentence is impossible for a Frenchman or British. Only for us Serbs and you Indians. We are always apologize. We are not nationalists. Why? I should apologize for nationalism. Who am I? Globalist? I don't know. Or New River.
No, but when I say that, Professor, I also mean to say that the Serbians and the Indians, perhaps, want to come out of that pocket, perhaps. Otherwise, why should they say it? There's a desire to connect to the Yes, please.
We're in one big global pocket, and it is very hard to us to go out. And that's because we have wrong concepts and the wrong interpretation of history and the wrong attitude, to all our capabilities. Language is a very good example for that, because success in English language is very fast. It's obvious, but it's superficial. It disappears because it has no roots. Today we speak in this world about 5,000 languages. Projection of UNESCO is that until the end of this century, 90% of all languages will disappear.
Devoured by English?
Will disappear. So the only the only language that will survive is English, maybe Chinese. So what does it mean? English is a language killer. It kills languages. It kills Indian language. It kills also Serbian languages. Look at that. We have titles of our stores only in English, exclusively in English. Why? Why?
I think your question is also related.
Could you please comment also on the other about perception of Indian culture in the West? That would be very interesting. The second thing I asked him.
I don't know. India has always been, I think, in the crossroads. And it's been going on. There is this attempt to reach the world, but maybe there is a problem somewhere. Maybe we are not sincere enough to actually transcend ourselves. We have not lived up to the expectations of Gandhiji and Tagore. We failed somewhere, and the failure, I think, is obvious. But let's see what happens in future, the way out. But right now, we are in the crossroads once again. It shows that this is very important. Wonderful. Nous esquissons la grande œuvre. Other men in other worlds, no doubt, follow up and complete it. So, in the middle of the road, let's hope to emerge. The problem of cultural exchange, as you know, is always there. India is such a huge country, and there is corruption, of course. For example, how to select the best? How do you select the best? The package deals, cultural package deals, are often insincere and inefficient and corrupt because of nepotism, which happens. I know you, you know me, so that kind of thing, it becomes slightly, somewhat obvious for a huge country like ours. And there has been a lack of sincerity. There has been a lack of earnestness in really hunting talent, to find out the best. For example, I've heard lectures by Indians, and I felt shy. I felt very disappointed. I thought they were not the best. It should have been represented by, our country should have been represented by better minds. I've seen them, but because of his unmanageable largeness, because of numerous other factors, it's not been properly represented. I think Professor Guha will agree, but the battle goes on. I'm not pessimistic, otherwise I would have stopped. But the battle goes on.
Yes, our hybrid literature is doing the job. That's why I said hybrid, we call it English like Indian English. That's hybrid literature, they're not rooted. So they are representing India. It sells immediately.
Neo-colonialism of language.
If you don't mind, I would also like to raise a question.
We're all thinking together, actually.
Yes.
We're thinking together.
About language and decolonization of minds. I would will tell you my personal experience from Lahore. One night I went to a concert of the nephew of Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan. And as you know, often with the Sufi drummers and players, they tend to be late for the beginning of the concert. And this guy was late for 2 hours. So, so in the meantime, there was a woman, there was a conferencier, and because the audience was getting more and more nervous over time, there was 5,000 people in the room, and it was a very fancy concert organized at the premises of some army country club and so on. So she was speaking on every 15 minutes or half an hour. She was trying to make the audience not be so nervous. But what was striking about her speech every single time was that she used so many English words while speaking in Urdu that I completely understood what she was saying. And this really was a disturbing fact for me, because I also noticed that in this respect, India and Pakistan are one cultural space, because the same phenomenon is visible in both countries. So that's one aspect. My question would be: do you think this is an irreversible process, or do you think that actually on a broader Indian cultural space there is a possibility for conquering your own languages? That's one thing. Another is more of a comment, also connected to decolonizing of mind. Before worldly known Edward Said and his concept of Orientalism, there are two authors that I would like to draw your attention on, and they were writing their work completely independently and most probably not knowing about each other, some 40, 50 years before Said, or even more. I would have to check the numbers, the years. One is William Du Bois. His name is written as Dubois. He is a African American of Belgian-French origin, and he was, of course, a mixed white and black race. And he has the concept of double consciousness. So what he claimed was that African Americans have an unsolvable problem, that they will constantly measure themselves with the eyes of whites, of American and Anglo-Saxon. And interestingly enough, in my opinion, I was trying to prove this in my PhD, recently defended, another author from European continent is a Russian immigrant, Count Nicholas Trubetskoy. And in his famous work, Europe and Humanity, he wrote that the whole humanity is divided in two camps. Romano-Germans, basically what we would call the West, and non-Romano-Germans. So he moved away from the concept of race towards concept of culture. So Du Bois's concept of colored, who is the rest, not the West, also it is equal, in my opinion, to Trubetskoy's concept of non-Romano-Germans. Because according to both Du Bois and Trubetskoy, you know, Russians who can be blue-eyed and with blonde hair are colored, because they're culturally being imposed by the West to be culturally inferior. So his concept was very similar to double consciousness, that not only Russians but all people who have subjugated to the Western culture are not the producers of cultural content, but imitators, and they're constantly chasing, and that because of the chase, because they're not producing new quality, they would always be forced to be culturally inferior in the system that is not theirs. So he was advocating that every culture should actually be the center of itself, not to be compared to the West. So in reality, in practice, what do you think about decolonizing of minds in India? Because this is the problem. I mean, universal. Because you know, maybe we look Gora to you. But as my friends in London told me, you're a Gora with a Desi soul, because they noticed the patterns. So the problems that you are talking about are not really foreign to us, as they might seem from your perspective. And what do you think about practice? Going back to the beginning of my comment and question, when is this lady going to use more Urdu or more Hindi in India and less English? What do you think there is an actual concrete way to fight this cultural wars?
No, it's been a problem everywhere. For example, it's easier said than done, decolonization of the mind. It's true. I can tell you something that's very interesting. During our freedom struggle for independence, from say late 19th century, after the reawakening of the mind, I would say, so all the doors are opened, and there was an attempt to use Western knowledge for a better understanding of the world situation. All our major writers, thinkers, they never sort of gave extra importance to English. This sort of thing he described would never happen, say, with our own teachers, with great scholars, but when they spoke in Bengali or Hindi or Gujarati, they spoke Gujarati and Hindi and Marathi. But when they spoke in English, it was impeccable. But this mixture, this phenomenon which you described, which is fairly common. I think I've seen the same thing in Bengali households. I've seen in the mother speaking to the child in a mixture of the mother language and English, which is ridiculous, absurd. I think this is one of the bad effects of globalization, the lure of America. Yesterday people talked about the attraction for money, the new generation, etc., etc. The same everywhere. And of course there are exceptions, but basically the same. So this mixing is part of a mind which has refused to be free. This has happened in the last 30 years or so. Earlier, 40 years maybe, but before that it was not different. So strangely, during independence, the struggle for independence, the mind was less colonized.
Sure.
There was an attempt to fight. Vivekananda would never use English in his language, a household domestic conversation. Tagore saw his English is perfect, but he wrote in Bengali. But this has happened recently, but there is always a resistance. I always note, since I'm a language man, I was carefully paying attention to your conversations in Serbian yesterday, and I found that you were not using English at all. I thought it was beautiful. So the resistance, for example, I don't use it in Bengali. I'm sure Professor Bhatt doesn't use it. I'm sure Dr. Banerjee doesn't use it. So we shall fight in our own pockets, but this is a phenomenon which is extremely dangerous, and decolonization of the mind is colonized again. I think because of America's importance, because of
Soft power,
culture, etc., etc. And even in France, for example, there's no question of colonization of the French mind. They always spoke in French. But I've heard their old ladies complaining that their grandchildren use English many times, and they don't read books anymore. They're hooked to the computer and the digital world. So I think the influence of computer, internet, everything is contributed to this erosion of values. The local space is threatened by the global space, and it's a dangerous crisis. I feel bad about it. I think it's humiliating, and your observations about it I thought were very, very good. Correct. Very great pathological analysis. Yes, we almost need a pathological report of the crisis. And what you say is very interesting. And I've seen the same thing every day, but we resist. As Sartre said, je résiste. Et je sais, je suis mort dans l'histoire, mais cette histoire, il faut le fonder. Said Sartre, I resist. And I will die in hope, with hope. But this hope has to be established. But I think the fight goes on. I'm not pessimistic. Let's see. There is a counter wave in India, for example, and there are people who are trying to re-establish the identity of the language. That's very, very important. There is an attempt to re-establish identity. For example, your question is very important. In school, the medium of instruction. Now they are going back to the roots once again. But the crisis started, the strangest part of it is the crisis started 30-40 years after independence.
I also have another connecting question, if you don't mind, sorry. I was told that if there is a similar phenomenon in Pakistan, the language, in India, sorry, the languages within the Indian realm. For instance, in Pakistan, I have heard that the level of Punjabi is lower than the level of Indian Punjabi because it is if the Punjabi people in Pakistan try to say, okay, let's learn a literate Punjabi, that it would be considered as a nationalist thing by Sindhs, Pashtuns, Muhajirs and other groups in Pakistan, because they are seen as a dominant group, although actually they are not dominant because all these other languages are more preserved and Punjabi is only reserved for the lower classes. Therefore, it is poorer. Is there a similar phenomenon in India that a dominant group is not allowed to speak its own language because the perception would be that there would be a political problem or something? No.
It is inverse.
You don't have a tradition. I said yesterday also, India doesn't have that tradition. What happened to Pakistan, because the creation of Pakistan itself is on false grounds. Faith can never ever be the basis for nationalism. Now, with that faith, they took Urdu. Yeah. With that faith, they took Urdu. Nobody speaks Urdu in that country as mother tongue. Urdu is the
Muhajirs, they speak Urdu as
who migrated from Bihar and UP. And they are now marginalized. They are considered Muhajir itself means refugee.
If you ask other groups, they wouldn't say so.
So that's the reality for those Urdu speaking people. Urdu is the national language, and they consider Urdu as, again, related to faith. Script. All languages are being written in Urdu script, right to left.
Yes.
So things have been, the basis has been very good. And as a consequence of that, Punjabi is not being allowed to be taught at school. So, right. But in Indian Punjabi is taught at school and Punjabi is a state language, which is not the case with Pakistan. Punjabi is Pakistan.
Yes, very good.
Thank you.
Answer. And I think these issues are all interrelated, and the politics of language, the politics of nationalism, all this. So I think all these are very complex issues, which really further complicates the problem. But yes, we have to live with it and try to find a way out. Professor, these are important issues we can't avoid at the same time. Thank you for pointing out.
Professor Guha, thank you so much for giving this very in-depth lecture and also insights for the questions that we wanted to raise. It's been already 2 hours and you must be
sorry
exhausted.
for that.
No,
We are
really
notorious for that. We don't let anybody go out before
Yes,
we
this is-
exhaust him.
that's the trademark of this institute. And I would once again want to greet you with a round of applause.
Very encouraging answer.